Trump is now promising $2,000 checks to low and middle income Americans as a rebate for the tariffs against foreign countries, he says. But let's not kid ourselves. This is actually wealth redistribution, the very thing people on the right admonish and scream about. And yet the greatest wealth redistribution scheme of my lifetime is now coming from the right. Here is the plan. Trump says all money left over from the $2,000 payments made to low and middle income USA citizens from the massive tariff income pouring into our country from foreign countries, which will be substantial, will be used to substantially pay down national debt. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So this looks really great on the surface. A lot of people are saying, wait a minute, so we're going to be getting $2,000 stimulus checks, essentially, $2,000 rebate checks from the tariffs on foreign countries. And then on top of it, whatever's left over is going to pay down the debt. This guy is a genius. Right? But what is this really all about? Let me first tell you about the actual plan that Trump is proposing. He is proposing $2,000 rebate checks for the tariffs to low and middle income Americans. So not for the rich, not for the high income earners, but he's saying it's going to be paid out to everybody who is in certain economic brackets. So this sounds kind of like the COVID stimulus, except it's not. This is a rebate check for apparently the revenue coming in from all of the tariffs. However, within hours of this being announced by President Trump, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent cast doubt on the plan. This is from ABC News, saying the payout could merely refer to tax savings enshrined by Trump's signature domestic spending measure, meaning end of the year, you'll get a tax write-off or a tax deduction, something along those lines that will make it to where $2,000 ends up remaining in your pocket, or maybe you'll get a refund for the $2,000. But it won't be like the stimulus checks where they send these out to Americans. Instead, you'll see it on your taxes. He said to ABC News that a tariff dividend may come in lots of forms. So, like I said, it could come in as a tax deductible or a rebate. A refund. Says a tariff dividend might come in lots of forms, saying the idea of a potential tariff dividend reminiscent of pandemic-era stimulus checks has raised questions about who would qualify and what to make of the Trump administration's mixed signals about the proposal. Some economists question whether the dividend is achievable with available tariff funds. Some are saying there's really not enough money coming in because it would be about $215 billion that I believe that they're bringing in $215 billion, but if you were to give this dividend to 150 million Americans, it would be $300 billion. So there isn't enough money to even pay the low and middle income Americans, let alone have enough left over to pay down the debt. Okay, but that being said, so let's just say that, on paper, that sounds like a really great plan, right? On paper, it's like, oh yeah, okay. We now have raked in all these billions of dollars, over $200 billion from tariffs on foreign countries. Most people, actually, I don't know. Is it most people, do you think that foreign countries are paying those tariffs? But let's say, if you're the average person and you do believe that, you believe that these tariffs are coming from China. China's paying us basically $200 billion. Haha, suckers. Okay. So then you're thinking, oh, brilliant. Trump is now giving this back to Americans. He's now giving $2,000 checks to Americans of Chinese money. Oh, this is so great. And on top of it, he's going to pay down the national debt with the rest. Oh, man, couldn't get a better president on the planet. Except that's not how tariffs work. China doesn't pay a dime in tariffs. Tariffs are paid for by Americans or American companies, usually American companies, or companies based in America who are selling those products. So the person who pays for the tariff is the importer, not the country. Countries don't pay a dime in taxes to the United States. We do not have the power to tax foreign countries. Just like, guess what? China cannot call you up and say, hey, Bob, you owe us some taxes. We've decided to tax Americans. You're not getting that phone call from China. Why? Because China doesn't have the power to tax you. And guess what? You don't have the power to tax China. So none of this money is coming from foreign countries. All of this money is being paid on American soil by companies on American soil, including, I believe the majority of them are American companies. They're importing in these Chinese goods or goods from wherever in the world. They're paying the tariff. What they end up doing is they raise the price of the goods. So you want to buy a patio set? You want to buy a Christmas tree? Here we go. You want to buy one of those Christmas trees with the lights already on it, and you want to get it from one of those big box stores. It's probably made in China. And now this year, those trees are more expensive. Why is that? Because there's a tariff on those trees. So last year, you're looking at thinking, I remember, it was almost time for me to replace my tree. I didn't do it last year because I thought, you know what, I could go one more year. Here I am. It's now that time. But my gosh, the tree has gone up 50% or 100, doubled, whatever the cost is, right? That is the tariff that has been passed on to you, the tax that has been passed on to you. We use the word tariff. It's like fancy or something like that. But the reality is it's just tax. And so the tax was paid by whichever company was planning on selling that Christmas tree here in the United States. Maybe the big box store, American box store, filled with American workers, owned by Americans. They have to pay that extra fee. That fee gets collected by the government. It's a tax. And now Trump is saying, yippee, look at that. We collected all this money and revenue off of the backs of Americans. We paid that tax because all of the prices of our goods went up. And now he's saying, don't worry, I'm going to give it back to you. Except he says, but I'm only going to give it back to the low income and middle income people. That is wealth redistribution. So you're now taking from the class of people who can afford to buy the new Christmas tree. They can afford to buy the shoes, or they can afford to buy whatever the goods are that have the tariffs on them. That is coming from the middle class and upper class, not the poor. They're not buying those things. And so now you're taxing the middle and upper class, and you're now going to package it up and bundle it all up together and then divide it up in $2,000 checks to give to the poor. That is wealth redistribution, which is an aspect of socialism. The very thing that Trump and people on the right scream about all day, every day. The left is marching in socialism. The left is bringing in wealth redistribution. The left wants to take from the rich and give to the poor. And here's Trump literally proposing that same exact plan. And yet people on the right are gobbling it up. They're so angry that Memdani, a guy that said, I'm going to stick around in New York rather than go off to foreign countries and kiss the wall in Israel. I'm going to stick around and talk to the New Yorkers in all 5 boroughs. And he screams about that. Republicans scream about that, calling it the left marching in socialism. And yet then, just mere days later, this guy couldn't even wait a week after screaming about socialism that Mamdani's bringing in. He couldn't even wait a week before he unveiled the most socialist policy of my lifetime. We are literally going to take from the rich and we're going to divide that money up and give it to the poor. Actually, we're going to do that straight up. That is socialism. Unbelievable. Well, it's an aspect of socialism. It's not fully socialism, but it's certainly one of the aspects when people on the right think of socialism. Wealth redistribution is one of those aspects. And here he is actually proposing to do this very thing. It is absolutely unbelievable. Totally, completely unbelievable. Okay. So I just want everybody to be clear on that's exactly what that is. This is a wealth redistribution plan. This is just taking from the rich and giving from the poor. Now, Trump has another interesting plan. He wants to unveil 50-year mortgages. He's also announced 15-year car loans. Okay, I'm not going to lie. First glance at this, and wow, the young people in America are things are so bad that young people in America need to they cannot afford homes. They're going to need a 50-year mortgage to lower the payment in order to afford it. That's how poor our younger class is. In fact, let me just show you this. It turns out that baby boomers have over half of all of the wealth in America by generation. The baby boomers have accumulated most of the wealth. And most of their wealth is in real estate. That's where it's in. Gen Xers have a good third of the pie. But look at those millennials and Gen Z. Silent generation, that's the group older than baby boomers. They have a small piece of the pie. Probably because they're baby boomer kids or they're something. The silent generation just doesn't seem to have very much money. I'm not actually really sure what their situations are. They're older. They're in their 80s and above. But I don't know if people in their 80s or above typically have a lot of money. I'm not 100% certain on what's going on with that. But the baby boomers ate up most of the pie. There they are, just chomping away at half the pie. While the generation slightly above them, the 80 and 90-year-olds today, have very little of the pie. And also with very little of that pie, it's that millennials and Gen Zs. You could see this This is a good representation of that, of the study that was done showing that baby boomers actually have the majority of the wealth. Gen X is doing okay, but not nearly as good as those baby boomers. Most of it in real estate. So this comes out, and then Trump says, okay, we should offer 50-year mortgages to the young people and 15-year car loans. Now, 15-year car loan is, what a disaster that is. That is a debt trap for sure. You look at a 50-year mortgage, your first instinct is, wow, young people are really suffering. It must be really bad. Now we're offering them a life of debt. 50 years, a life of debt. By the time you could afford your first home, maybe you're 30 years old, it is going to be till you're 80 years old till you pay that sucker off. This is a life of debt. However, I will say, I have been quite surprised about something I uncovered in researching this for this segment, and that is, it's actually, now the 15-year car loan is terrible. I don't recommend that. I'm not recommending anything financially, by the way. I just want to make that clear. But I don't recommend, anybody take out a car loan for 15 years. However, a 50-year mortgage, let me just lay out the numbers for you, and then you decide what you think on this. It's actually brilliant for young people and could end up being a boon to helping them gain more wealth. Now, of course, this will also make banks very wealthy, but I do think this could help the young people as well. Now, let me explain this. We're going to line up 4 people. We're going to have this theoretical Sally, Sarah, Ian, and Ethan. They're all 30 years old. They're all buying the same $500,000 house. I just put it at $500,000. That's a little more. That's higher, but I just wanted to make a good number. They probably are going to buy something more in the 3s or the 4s or something, depending on the city they're in, of course. Maybe in some cities it's 500, maybe it's less than others. Okay, but we'll just stay with 500, okay? They're all earning enough to comfortably afford their payments. Each put down 10%. So they each put 50 grand down. Now, maybe they can't really do that in real life, but that's okay. That number actually doesn't really matter. I don't want you to pay too much attention on the down payment. So they each borrow, let's say, $450,000, and they do it at 6% interest at the current interest rate. Now, the house appreciates, we're going to say, at 3% annually, with inflation averaging 2.5%, and investments grow at about 8% annually. We're going to stick to those basic numbers that are really conservative numbers. Of course, there's going to be worse years, good years, right? It's all going to be like that. Sally takes out a 30-year mortgage, and she just does the classic 30-year mortgage on her house, and she pays the mortgage every month. And by the time 30 years is up, her house is paid off. And Sally is 60 years old, and now she owns her house outright. That is a good feeling. Meet Sarah. Sarah has a different strategy. She does a 30-year mortgage, but she actually refinances every 10 years and invests the money. So this is a strategy I've heard about. My aunt said to me, she's a very, very smart businesswoman, and she says, do not ever pay off your mortgage. And she's got some of the best financial advisors advising her. She's working around a lot of rich people, and they give her all this great advice. And she says, do not ever pay off your house, refinance it, but you always carry a mortgage. And we didn't really get deep into that conversation, but now in doing the research, I understand why people take this strategy of always carry a mortgage, never pay your house off. So let me explain. So Sarah does a 30-year mortgage, but she refinances every 10 years. And what does she do with that money? She doesn't spend it on consumer goods. She doesn't go around and buy a car. She doesn't go around and buy herself some nice bags. She doesn't even remodel her house. She invests that cash into the market at 8%. So when you do that, now, in the end, at 30 years later, Sarah is going to still have a mortgage, but she's going to have so much money in the bank, in the investment bank, growing, that when she takes out her 4% every year to live off of for retirement of her investments, she has more money than Sally. Not only can Sarah pay her mortgage, but Sarah can pay the tax and insurance that Sally's also going to have to pay. And Sarah will still be left over with some money in her pocket to spend on maybe repairs for the house or whatever. But she's got an income source coming in. Plus, she's got her Social Security. We'll say if she's got that. Maybe she won't, right? Same with Sally, though. If Sarah doesn't have it, Sally doesn't have it. But Sarah now has money working for her in an investment fund. And this strategy is used by a lot of really savvy homeowners. They decide to always carry a mortgage rather than basically keeping the money in the walls of the house. Your house is growing in appreciation and equity, but the money is trapped in your walls, like kind of literally trapped in your walls. So instead, you take it out every 10 years, you refinance, take that money out of your walls, you stick it in a bank and investments Or maybe you get a rental, you buy another house and you rent it out, or maybe you start a business, whatever you do, but you put it in another asset that allows for income generation of some kind. If it's an investment, you're living off of the interest. If it's a business, you're living off of the revenue. If it's a rental, you're living off of the rental income. So you've got other ways to bring that money in rather than keeping it trapped in the walls of your house. So by and large, like if you start, basically Sarah ends up with double the net worth, almost double, maybe 70%. It's actually 70%. Sally just pays her mortgage off straight up. If Sarah takes that money and refinances every 10 years and takes that money out and puts it in another investment, in 30 years, Sarah ends up 70% wealthier than Sarah. It's counterintuitive, but it's the money no longer being trapped in your walls. You're actually able to use it. And the only way Sarah would be able to use any money, or Sally, I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. I should have used different names. The only way she'd get money after her 30-year mortgage is paid off, she'd have to do like a reverse mortgage or something like that. Okay. So that's the basics on a 30-year. Now, on a 50-year, it's even more wealth accumulation. So now let's say you got Ian and Ethan, and Ian is the one who ends up, he's got a 50-year mortgage. He just never really pays it off. He keeps a small payment for life, uses, he's got a 50-year mortgage. It takes forever to pay that sucker off, right? Okay. Then you've got Ethan, and he's got a 50-year mortgage, but he refinances every 10 years and he invests that money. So he's able to do it 5 times, whereas the other example, it was over 30 years, you could do it once every 10 years. You should, look at it once every 10 years. Ethan is able to do it longer. He's able to do more of that investment. And in the end, with all of them putting the same amount of money down, buying the same exact house, in the end, by age 70, Sally, her net worth is about $790,000 in today's dollars, but that is all trapped in her house. Sarah, on the other hand, is worth $1.9 million, most of it not in her house, most of it in investments that she can live off of. Ian, he is now worth, with a 50-year mortgage and just paying it off. But what he does instead, he takes a 50-year mortgage so he can lower his monthly payment by, let's say, $500 a month. And he takes that $500 and he invests that $500 a month because he's got this 50-year mortgage with a lower payment. He ends up $360,000 richer than Sally with his 50-year mortgage, but taking that extra money and investing it every month. Ethan, on the other hand, he's a big investor. He takes that 50-year loan, but he refis it every 10 years, and he takes that money and dumps it into another investment. He ends up worth about $1.67 million in money that he has access to. So he ends up twice as wealthy as Sally. $600,000 and even $600,000 ahead of Ian. So their total net worth, it grows. If you're Sally with a 30-year mortgage, it's $790,000. It's just all in your house. Sarah, it's $1.09 million that she can actually live off of. Ian with his 50-year, but in this case, I said take that extra money that you're saving and invest that. He ends up $1.15 million is what he ends up with it as his net worth at 70 years old. All of these are at 70. And Ethan he does the investment. He ends up refinancing every 10 years, invest that money. He ends up the winner in all of this with $1.67 million in total net worth by the time he's 70 to live off of. I was shocked by this, actually. I mean, many of you are probably way smarter than me. You say, oh, yeah, Cam, we know about this refi and reinvest. That's what it's called, the refi reinvest scheme. We've known about this for a long time. We do it. That's how we've done it. Oh, yeah, this is what smart people do. Well, I didn't know this. I wasn't very smart. But now I'm smarter. And because when I saw these 50-year mortgages, I thought, oh, my gosh, this is like awful. Like, we're going to trap these kids in debt for the rest of their lives? Well, it could. Or if they were smart with the investment, they actually could turn this into a wealth generation machine for them. And maybe they'd end up with a larger piece of that pie. I'm shocked by this, actually. I'm shocked by these numbers. But you have to be disciplined. When you refinance your house every 10 years, you cannot think, wow, I got all this money. I'm going to go buy my Ferrari now. I'm going to go shopping. I'm going to remodel my house. Like, you have to be very dedicated and just dump it into another investment vehicle. and just say, get the money out of my walls and let me invest it somewhere. I just need the money out of my walls. That is so, so it turns out, actually, these 50-year mortgage schemes, for many of us, it's way too late. I'm not going to be alive in 50 years. But for young people that are, in their 20s right now, if a 50-year mortgage would allow them maybe to get into the house to begin with. So maybe in the beginning, if they've got 10 years before they need to make enough money to refinance it, well, they actually could just still have jobs where they're not really making a ton of money. They can now afford a home with a 50-year mortgage that made the payment low enough for them to afford it. That's okay. It's going to increase in value in 10 years. Yes, they'll have paid off less than the person who did the 30-year, but they're still going to have equity in their home. They could take that equity out and reinvest it. And they could do that over and over again throughout their life and actually have a retirement. And that is without saving a dime. That is without relying on Social Security, which may or may not be around. Like I said, I am no financial wizard. I am not a financial expert. So these are just numbers I quickly ran. Well, I spent a couple hours on it today, but I ran these numbers and really was shocked by the outcome that actually a 50-year mortgage can, especially if you are in a position to take that lower monthly payment you're given, maybe not in the beginning when you're young, but at some point, you'll be able to say, you know what, we could afford that extra $500 a month now because now our careers are better. We're now in our 40s. We can now afford that. Take that $500 and invest it every month rather than having the mortgage that your other friend has, the 30-year mortgage, and you will still end up better off in the end than somebody who just got a straight-up 30-year mortgage and paid it off because you're investing that money and it grows more in the markets. So pending, and of course, things go up and down. You'd have to wait out the bad years. You'd have to hope for some boom years. There's all of that goes on into it. But I was actually shocked by these numbers. So it turns out that perhaps for these young people, a 50-year mortgage. Now, I don't think this is why Trump is saying we're going to open up 50-year mortgages. I don't think he's saying it because he's thinking this is going to be a wealth boon, actually, for young people if they're smart. He doesn't want to tell everybody this strategy. He wants to save that for his own kids. That's what rich people do. They save it for their own. But, he's thinking, I'm just going to help young people get into houses because it'll be a lower payment. Okay. And he's also saying, yeah, and I also want them to have car loans that are forever. And that's a terrible idea because that is not an appreciating asset. You cannot take money out of your car and refinance it and put it in the investments. You can't do that. So on consumption goods like cars and other things, it's a bad idea. But when it comes to homes that appreciate in value, okay, I was shocked by this. I was shocked when I ran the numbers that actually a 50-year mortgage is not bad. Like what your instincts, like my instincts were right away, was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. We're going to entrap kids in debt forever. And then I remembered what my aunt told me. She says, oh, you never want to pay off that house. Believe me. And then I looked into it and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to ever pay off my houses. My house. I'm never going to do it. Well, yeah, that's just me. Again, do your own research on this, run your own numbers. But I was shocked by this. I'd be curious. Maybe you're thinking of something I'm not thinking. I would absolutely love to hear from you on this. Email me, kim@kimiverson.com. Email me and tell me if I'm wrong on these numbers. Because like I said, I am not a financial wizard, but I was shocked to see this after I did run the numbers. I expected this to be the worst thing ever for young people. And I was surprised to see that it's actually maybe a good thing overall for young people. You tell me. Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.